Welcome back to the Infinity One podcast, episode number 10. Super excited to have Matilda Sung here with me. She is a hands-on early stage investor, currently the GP at Ludis Capital and managing partner at Sung Capital Partners. She has more than 15 years of experience spanning the NFL, McKinsey, PayPal, global investment banking, and she brings deep cross-sector expertise and a passion for innovation that makes her one of the most dynamic VCs across the entire world in space. So Matilda, thank you so much for having me, and I'm just excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, Zeus. It's great to be here today.
Yeah. So as we were saying beforehand, look, I want to get to know more about you and more so that our listeners could, get to learn more about you and where you came from, what got you interested in the VC world, and what ultimately got you interested in the startup space.
Sure. Well, I'm a lot older than you, so I have many stops along the way. I wish I could have said I was as pointed as you were in your age. I don't think I could have called it, but if I look back on my career, all the stops I made, it kind of makes sense. But to start it all off, I'm from Canada originally, born and raised there, but I had a chance to live internationally in Singapore, in Hong Kong, London. So it was really great for me to get that exposure. I grew up in a business family. My father was an oil executive. I think that certainly had some influence on me. I did my undergrad in business. I did what most undergrads did from business, one of two things, either banking or management consulting. I chose banking. So I started my career in investment banking out in London. I did 2 years in mergers acquisitions, got a little burnt out with the 80-hour weeks, moved over to New York to the trading floor, spent some time in equity derivatives, then realized I just wanted something more. I always had like an entrepreneurial bug. I wanted to create something, build something. And I think that's when business school started calling. And New York's very hardcore finance. And I was like, I need to get out of this bubble. I need to go where the cool people are at, the cool kids are, making things. And that was California for me. And so I went over to Berkeley Haas and did my MBA there. And grad school, and Mindy, you'll find out, is a great time to tinker, right? I tried many different things, startups here and there, business plan competitions. Nothing really stuck, right? And so I did the next best thing, or I fell in love with tech, actually, more than anything. I fell in love with the industry. It was 2008, so a lot of really cool things coming out, like recovering from the dot-com, like bust and everything, sort of the second wave of innovation coming about. I had a chance to intern at Amazon in their cloud division in web services, and I think that was really influential. Like my group reported to Andy Jassy, which I think I mentioned to you, which at that time I had no idea he would then be the person to go run Amazon later on. But I learned so much during that time, and I ended up getting an offer with them. But I couldn't convince my then boyfriend, now husband, to leave New York, his finance career, and join me up in Seattle. And so I did the next best thing. I went to work for PayPal out in the Bay Area, and I was brought in to build out developer APIs, so helping build out their tools for different payment systems. And within a few months, I was asked to join their internal startup called X.com. In short, a really, large dream that they had to build this all in one place for merchants, small and large, to have everything they need to get their stores online. This was during the period where people were trying to figure out, how do we bridge online and offline shopping? How do we get them the right customer experience, inventory management, delivery, et cetera, sort of around when Amazon's really thriving, right? How can we service the small merchants for this? So really cool, earned my chops in engineering, launched a bunch of products, and felt really good about myself because I come from finance and I wanted to transfer to tech. And so I kind of checked the tech box there. And then time had it such that my husband then got an offer to run a division of a bank down here. And so it was time to move to SoCal. And during this time, Silicon Valley Silicon Beach hadn't really sort of emerged in full force just yet. And so I ended up talking to some management consulting firms. They were doing something really interesting at that time. They were moving away from just advising their clients on strategic recommendations, but also like implementing what they were suggesting. And so they wanted folks with the background of being able to build product, deliver product, but also have a strategic mindset. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I'm in. This is what I want to do. And so I spent 6 months with Booz Digital, and then I moved over to McKinsey to build out their digital team. And it was just a fun few years of seeing, like a front row seat of seeing industries getting disrupted by tech, like old industries, right? Like financial services, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, entertainment. And then it was time to go in-house. Like I had my first child. I needed to have more time at home. And so they're like, talk to the NFL. They're looking for someone, to think about digital media strategy. And so I went in and I was just blown away by how they were thinking about the world and how strategic and forward-thinking they were. They wanted to bring someone in to think about the content that they had digitally and how can we service the young generation. And I was like, oh, wow, I thought you were just busy selling season tickets. But no, they were actually very, very thoughtful. And so the next few years was just an incredible time where I got to see all the innovation that was happening in sports. And as I said at the top of this answer's long answer here, I feel like there's a reason for everything. I started in finance, got my finance chops, got my tech chops, got my chops in seeing how things are, getting disrupted by tech. And now I'm in an industry that's definitely being disrupted. And so a thesis came together, started coming together around how technology could disrupt sports. And I'll fast forward, I'm sure you'll dig deep into sort of how Ludis started, but I found myself with like-minded investors who also shared a similar thesis around technology disrupting sports. And there was really an opportunity here. And so for the last 5 years, as part of Ludis Capital, we've just been investing in cutting-edge technology, early-stage technology that impact the larger sports world.
That's so amazing. That's so amazing. And I'm blown away. There's a lot to unpack under that. I mentioned to you that part of what I want to do is get new technologies and implement them into old industries like the healthcare industry. For me, it would be the real estate industry, like the logistics business and whatnot. And can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how do you see the implementation of new tech into old industries, and where do you see the future of that going?
Yeah, so it comes several pieces there, right? I think first of all, I want to say, the fact that you have this desire to disrupt a industry, I wouldn't say real estate is archaic, but there's definitely a lot of areas.
Yeah, I agree.
Open green
100%,
space to make a change, right? A couple things. I think one thing is timing, right? So sometimes we have the technology available, but the industry or the government regulations are not ready yet, ripe to take in that. We've seen, in my lifetime, I've seen several of those phases, right? We looked at AR, VR early on when I was at the NFL. In 2013, it was not ready yet. Even now, it's still not in full blast, right? AI, we're like, actually, let's pick up AI. It's a better example. Yeah. AI, if you have not heard of AI, then I don't know where you've been in the last 6 months or a year, right? And so I think AI is at a place right now. AI's had a lot of waves, right? Over the last 30, 50 years, right? There are scientists researching this and making headway, but really to make mass headway, everything had to be in place, right? The industries that were ready to take on that technology had to be ready to take it on. They had to understand, how do we reskill and retool the workers that would then be disrupted? Regulators need to be around to figure out, okay, how are we going to take on this workforce that's no longer going to be relevant? Government needs to be involved, right? So I think there's a timing aspect of it. So when you ask for an industry like real estate and technologies you're looking at, I want one thing would be the timing. Is the industry ready for it? Right. With all the pieces surrounding, ready to take it on. I think the second related piece is probably around workforce management, change management. So during my time at McKinsey, I think coupled with every engagement I had was this component of change management. So think about M&A. When companies merge, come together, there is a 12 to 18 month period where people need to rethink about their work processes, rethink about their work environments. Like, how do we adapt new technology? How do we adapt new processes, new things? So I think that should not be something that's thought of lightly when you think about, incorporating new technology into that. I think the last piece is business model generation, right? SaaS is a very common term now. Like, I think maybe 15 years ago, it really wasn't so, right? What does that mean? How do you monetize? Is it monthly? Is it per user? Is it an annual contract? So I think these are some things that you'll want to play around with as you enter that space. Like, I'm not too familiar with real estate, but some of the ideas that you have, is it going to be licensing the technology? Is it, packaging a full service solution?
A full service,
Yeah. So some things to think about. And because if you're first mover advantage, you have the benefit of testing different things as well.
Yeah.
But something to definitely keep in mind.
I've had lots of ideas, and we really want to streamline the entire process of real estate development, right? Coming from conception to inception and seeing how we can streamline the entitlement processes, but that goes in with the government, and then seeing how we can either use modular construction to better, construct buildings, or if we could, just have a better bridge between the capital stack. Because when it comes to these big development projects, I remember a developer that I spoke to, he said he had to get funding from 30 different sources for one project in LA. And it's crazy, the entire thing and the entire process that goes behind just making one single project. When in LA, we're short 500,000 units, and it's there should be something else out there that can just disrupt this industry and make it better, because the U.S. as a whole, we're short a couple million homes, and there has to be a better way. There has to be something we can do, and that's what my partner and I have. We've been ideating a lot about what new technologies we can put in, how we can streamline the entire process. So it's great that I got those insights from you.
Question for you: Is the pain point in that world the need to manage a large number of investors with varying needs and whatnot, and matching them to the investment? I just think about in our world, in venture, we've seen democratization of access, right? You've got AngelList, you've got all these crowd-funded type platforms are making it very, very accessible and easy to manage through technology. Is that one of the pain points you guys are trying to solve for?
That is one of the pain points, but there are countless pain points. One of the other pain points is that real estate, it's cyclically driven, which means that it's affected by the economy. And right now we're in a bad spot because of the tariffs, where the interest rates are sitting at and whatnot. And then it has to do a lot with the government itself and bureaucracy, because in terms of the development process, there's so much red tape and so much bureaucratic policies that go into it. So it's the industry, it's moving at such a fast pace with all these new laws that are coming out, that it takes time for the policymakers to keep up with what's happening. And there has to be a way we can bridge that gap. And then also, back to your investor point, a lot of these investors, they're simply looking for, what's going to be the biggest bang for your buck? What's the biggest ROI that we can get on a certain project? But they're ignoring the fundamental aspects of how fast can we make this project come to life so that we can get our return, but at the same time, solve this issue for me, I want to do it in a sustainable way, because I'm really, really big on sustainability, as I said, renewable energy and whatnot. How can we do it in a sustainable way, but at the same time do it in a purpose-driven way? Because AJ and I were talking about this, AJ and Wosu, and we said that we really want to have a legacy on the world, and how can we do our startups and everything that we do in life with a purpose and with a mission to leave a legacy behind, because that is something really big. We don't just want to be for profit, we want to be for purpose. And bridging that gap is something that we're looking at to do so.
I mean, it's great to hear that you're very zeroed in, passionate, and focused on that. Because that's really going to pave the way for you, right? Even though it's murky, you don't know exactly, but you have that clear vision.
Yeah. I want to ask you so your role right now, you're an investor, you're the GP at Ludis Capital, and you're also a venture capitalist. What does your day-to-day look like right now?
Yeah, day-to-day is really, I wish I had more of a routine. I'll start by saying that. I think the only routine I have is sort of the news sources I go to every morning, the chat groups I go to for the various investor pieces I look at. But really, it's kind of all over the place. I would say a typical day involves probably 30% in front of my computer, responding to emails, looking at new investor decks, giving feedback to it, reviewing possible term sheets for investments. I would say the 70% of it is either on a call or in-person meeting. And so those calls are going to be either with my business partner, who's based out in New Zealand, which is a little challenging time-wise, or any of our venture partners about sort of what we're seeing in the market, some of the startups that we're evaluating, where do we stand on that, just things that we're also seeing in the world, right? How are tariffs affecting us? How's, geopolitical concerns affecting us? Then there's conversations with founders. And they could be sort of all over the place, everything from just a first-time meeting them providing a pitch to us, to a follow-up, hey, we're interested, but I wanted to, get more intel in terms of how you're doing in this particular space, to it's one of our Portco's founders where we're working with them, getting feedback or getting an update rather on where they are. And I'd say the rest is it's market dialogue, if you will. So either with existing investors, co-investors, prospective investors, and those conversations are more macro in nature. Really kind of trying to get a gauge of where you stand on certain things. That would be a typical makeup of day. I think those percentages can switch depending on where we are in a month cycle, if you will. We do have like monthly investment co-meetings where we get together and we sort of look at the totality of the startups that we reviewed for the month, and decide, are there ones that we're going to move past certain stages to dive a little bit deeper into. But I would say that's your typical day. A lot of talking.
That's amazing.
Talking. So I do value the 30% when I'm sort of just getting stuff done.
Let me ask you this. You said that 30% you're like evaluating you're on your computer, but when it comes to evaluating different startups and like seeing if they're a potential investment, like what is the one key factor that you look for?
In our stage of focus, which is early stage, where I'll caveat by saying it's past POC, they have a working product, a working service, they typically have some customers already, they have a path of $1 million ARR. At that point in time, it's still very much who the founder is. I mean, first, provided like what they have to offer is a solution. Obviously, it can't be some dream of like, I don't know what, but it has to have, assuming that it already has market fit to a certain degree, it's really the founder, right? We can't tell too much from financials. Sometimes, those are not totally baked in. They don't have their team fully fleshed out. So there's actually very little to gauge on, right? At this point in time, we already know that what they're offering to market is needed. It's like, can this person take it from A to Z? Because that person's going to be center stage at this point in our life cycle.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. And when it comes to evaluating these startups across like the sports sector and the sports industry, like what are some of the coolest new companies that you have personally seen, and like what is something like amazing that's on your radar? Yeah,
so we've been looking at this for the last 5 or so years, and I'd say some of these trends still are very relevant. So top of mind for me, a sector of subvertical rather, is health and wellness, fitness at large. I'm sure AJ may have touched on that. I just think there is so much innovation happening. And the reason why this one's interesting is one of our core thesis is this idea that sports isn't just for the pro athlete or the owners, but it's for everybody. It touches everybody.
I agree.
And not even as a fan, but as a like healthy individual looking to live a healthy life. There are just so many touch points, right? And so I think I said to you previously, a company that could offer something for an athlete could be relevant for you and me, right, for daily living. And so I'm loving companies that are getting into that space of wellness for your average non-professional athlete person, right? And there's just so much you can do beyond, like, let's say data analytics. We saw a lot, the wave where there were a lot of sort of like wearables, if you will. I think we're moving more towards like customized regimens and recovery. I'm interested in a lot of recovery. One of our companies, Hyperice, is really doing some cool things there. They made an announcement last summer about a collaboration with Nike. So
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
think about
cool.
Sneakers that could do a lot for you, right? Yeah.
That's
really,
so cool.
Really cool. Another space that we continue to watch quite a bit is gaming. So I don't want to say sports betting. We were quite hot in sports betting in the early 2020-ish, 21, when, PASPA repealed the whole the federal level managing sort of how sports betting is regulated at state level. And so we were very gung-ho, very excited. We didn't really see it pan through just yet. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we knew sports betting was playing into this whole casual gaming concept that we were seeing across the U.S. With younger demos such as yourself that really just want to, like, not necessarily place a sports bet, but like play games with your friends, right? Can look at props and casual prop bets, right? So there are a couple companies who are looking at that space. They're doing some very interesting things in game. So looking, at a baseball game and seeing, okay, how many strikeouts is he going to have in the next inning 6, right? Very fun, just like easy, or even head to heads, right? Like very simple things that captivate the avid fan, but it's still an open entryway for the casual fan, the female fan, the non-traditional profile fan. So I think those things are interesting because it's that larger market we want to hit. Again, in venture, we need to think about things that hit a large total addressable market. So I would say those are a couple of areas that are top of mind. Oh, one more if I can add.
Yeah.
Youth sports.
Yeah.
Youth sports. I am deep in youth sports in my own personal life. And I will say there's quite a bit of, M&A happening, innovation happening the last year with a lot of like team management. Like you'd be surprised how much money and involvement happens just in the U.S. I mean, U.S. alone, right? And granted, we are a leader. There's just so much going into there. And you talk about an industry that needs to be, a sub-industry that needs to be disrupted, I would be youth sports.
That's amazing.
And I think there's a lot of cool things now with AI technologies that can really accelerate how things are done and make things more efficient. So I'm watching a few things in that space.
Can you dive more into that? I want to see, how is AI being implemented into the sports industry?
So, AI is...
It's a really big question. But in your world specifically, or in your perspective,
I mean, it cuts across all the I think I mentioned earlier, we invest in sort of 8 different sub-verticals, if you will. And there is a place for AI in each one of them, right? I think the most obvious ones would be sort of AI from a efficiency standpoint, like AI assistive tools. One of the earlier use cases we saw for AI was just in the cases of ticket management, right? Or customer service, right? Instead of hiring tons of people to manage the customer experience for someone who's looking to buy Dodger tickets or Laker tickets, having AI bots, assistive AI to help with that kind of stuff. So sort of the earliest applications of AI. I think with the developments that we've seen to date, we're seeing more sophisticated applications as it relates to for talent acquisition, for scouting means, right? Or predictive means for gaming, both for in-game with coaches, and also in the predictive space for the fan when it comes to sports betting I mentioned, right? So there are applications of that space as well. Not as obvious would be, I'd say, marketing. There's a lot of really cool things that are happening in the marketing space where we're moving towards customization, right? We don't believe in like just showing you, hey, this Vita coconut just for you, Zeus, right? Like we need to sort of streamline it further. Hey, this age demographic really attunes to the color blue. They typically already drink 3 other different types of coconut juices, and now we have to really like streamline it for him and give him something interesting and engagement. Like, hey, next week there's actually going to be something happening at Soho House in collaboration with Vita Coco, and a more tailored offering is likely to compel you to convert more, right? And so AI is helping analyze just the troves of data we've collected over the last 10 years or so, and how do we make sense of it? How do we make it more intelligent in how we serve offers to our fans with the goal of obviously driving up consumption, right?
That's so cool.
So I think marketing is a huge place where there's a lot of plays.
Completely agree. That is so cool. And I'm excited to see that. And look, I want to ask you this. We have the FIFA World Cup coming to LA in 2026, and we have the Super Bowl coming in 27, and the Paralympic Games coming in 28. What new opportunities do you see like LA capitalizing on with those events coming, and just what is your stance on that?
I think it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a great thing for LA. Did you say the Olympics as well, right? The Olympics, yes. That's a huge one, right?
Yeah, I'm excited.
Super excited. I hope we pull it all together with the infrastructure in our city and our and whatnot. I think it's going to. LA is a very old city. Okay, I'll say I'm not from LA. But there's a lot of infrastructure that's probably deserving of a turnaround, right? I'm grateful SoFi is built. I was on that project, thinking about that. I was like, oh my goodness. And I think the advent of all these major world of sporting events will really be an accelerant, a catalyst for Los Angeles and all its partners to get its city into a place that it's modern. Wait, you're in real estate. This idea of smart cities, really, really important. I really hope that this becomes a driver to get us to a place where we can get closer to being a smart city that's comparable to like Doha, Hong Kong, Beijing, right? Tokyo.
I've heard of that correlation,
right? And so, I'll actually give a shout out to a buddy of mine who is running a parking company. He's a former NBA star, and He is now him and his buddies who are also friends of ours in Ludis. They're doing some really cool things as it relates to smart parking. Beyond sort of like, hey, there's a green light, there's a spot, red light, there's no spot, but really being able to collect through available data who is driving the car. Like, again, back to that Vita Coconut example, right? Like, it's Zeus. Hey, he and his buddies like to eat at, I don't know, Buffalo Wild Wings before. I don't know. They typically like to have drinks at this place after. Let's get them like an offer or a coupon or something like that gets them into those retail environments. So getting into the whole smart city concept to really close the loop in the customer journey. I think one of our initial thesis with Ludis is there's just a lot of money left on the table with sports. Yeah. It doesn't just start with like you getting a ticket to an event at the Olympics. It's you thinking today, years before, who you want to have in that experience with you at the Olympics, leading up to it. That's money right there. That's still part of the customer journey. And then, of course, there's a journey during, but the journey afterwards. Like, I was at the Olympics last summer in Paris. And
that's so cool.
Super cool, super cool. And there were so many.
What was your favorite event, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. I have to say, it was the one where I took my daughter to. Okay. We went to dressage in Versailles. It was sort of like
so cool.
out of world experience. And it was at the Versailles,
that's so
which is amazing,
that's
right? At the castle.
So cool. I know.
And they had so many commemorative options for you, whether it's like the ticket or, I don't know, the visuals, a package, the journey. Like, there's just a lot in that experience that could be monetized. And I think there's so many parties that are involved with these major events, I think they probably have some of the brightest people on it. I'm hopeful to see these things come through.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so amazing. And now going back to the early stage investing, like when you're evaluating like startups, like these founders, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see founders make when they're like initially like going out to raise the capital from angels and VCs, like just some of those points that obviously are pain points for them, but how can like you help them from a investor point of view?
Yeah, I think, again, going back to the stage at which we invest in, it's sort of like this inflection point stage. It
is, yeah.
Right? So it is a really, really tough time for the founder, right? They often have to wear many different hats, be at different places, probably burnt out, not paying themselves and whatnot, right? And so I think one of the mistakes, we have made and they have made is trying to do everything. You will have to do everything. At some point, there will be that painful period where you need to do that. And then you need to be very strategic about how you spend your time. How
you can outsource and delegate? Yeah. Or do you think it's like bringing on another co-founder or working with more people?
Combination of those things. It depends on where you're at, right? A combination of those things, right? Time is your most valuable asset.
I agree.
And oftentimes the companies that come to us, there isn't really, like, we're not investing in hard technology. So it's not like it's so novel, right? That's all patented. It's likely that someone has a similar idea. So time to market is really key. So if you're running around like a headless chicken doing like investor meetings and talking to coding at night, like, it's going to burn out. It's going to collapse, right? So those who have really managed to surround themselves with a group of people that can really accelerate them is key. And it could be everything. It doesn't even have to be hiring someone. It could be surrounding yourself with the right investors or the right advisors that can be your influencers to help you like get a fast track on the fundraising part, right? Help you put together your investor deck so you're not, scrambling on that if you really need to handle the tech. Now, there may be times where you need to get out of the code now. You're done coding, right? You need to be the face of the company and you need to go out there and start talking, right? And that's when we can come in and sort of say, hey, let's find someone who can sort of manage the stack for you so you can be the face and get the funds to really scale from there. So I think it's that sort of tricky part of like going from wearing all hats to finding your place.
Right. It sounds right. That sounds completely right. And I want to ask you this. Have you seen like any difficulties arise with the recent tariffs and whatnot when it comes to fundraising? Or like, do you see like startups like having a harder time to fundraise in this environment with the high interest rates? I don't know if that affects the startup world, but just with the tariffs and all the uncertainties around the market right now.
Yeah, I would say it's been hard for the venture world and also sports world at large, not necessarily because of tariffs, but tariffs rolled into this larger geopolitical uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And I think there was some hope leading into the new administration. middle of last year and so we saw some pickup in funding. But I think at large, even the large corporates, the Fortune 50, the Dow Jones, companies, all the major CEOs have really kind of held off in making such strong comments just yet, because a lot of it is still being ironed out. I know, right? I know. I think too, because I'm Chinese, and a lot of people are like, oh my God, what's happening with China last week? I'm like, it's hell as of last week. But then this week, it's like, oh, maybe they're redoing all the different levels. So it's hard to attribute it to tariffs. I think it's this layer of uncertainty, which is causing a lot of investors to be more trigger shy, if you will, which has obviously a consequential
So they're just holding out on the sidelines and just kind of waiting.
I think that's not holding out. There's definitely still investments being made, but I think there's an extra layer of caution. Right. So you really, for what it means for the founders, like you really have to knock it out of the park. Right. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Makes complete sense. Yeah. Makes complete sense. And I want to ask you this. This is more like on a personal note. I know that you are like super busy, like doing all these things, and you've been busy your entire life. And how has it been like now, like having a child and still like doing all these big things in life? And how are you able to manage like your at-home relationship and then being a mother as well, while still like doing all these big things in the industry?
I'm like, the one time I don't really have an answer because I haven't figured it out really. It's juggling. It's a lot of juggling. And I think if anything, every step along my career probably helped me with managing my life as it is now. It is extraordinarily hard when you have dependents. I have 3 young children with tons of activities. It's a little crazy. But again, I think the things you learn before that really do set you up to succeed as best as you can. I think about we use Slack at home. I use a lot of lists. Like when I was a product manager with tech teams, like daily stand-ups. Like these are just practices that you can bring into your home life to bring some order and organization.
That's amazing. That's so cool. And just like looking back at your career in its entirety, like obviously going into the finance sector and then moving into tech, and now you're doing all these big things in the VC world, being an investor. What are some of the biggest lessons that you have learned, and like some of the lessons that you can just like pour out onto us?
Yeah, I think if I could tell my younger self like one thing that probably would have helped me is don't get too siloed in a way of thinking about your career. I think I have a tendency to think one track, and that's the track you have to be on. And that could just be leftover from the generation prior to mine, which was very committed to one track. And if you jump, it's like, why? What's going on? What's wrong? When in fact, I think that's a beauty of the generational shifts that I'm like witnessing myself. And you're probably right in the thick of it, right? It's like, it's not so much you're shifting, it's you're actually adding to. And when I look at my career today, like, I don't think I'd be a great investor if I didn't have all those stops along the way, right? They all had a place in contributing to the value that I add to what I do today, even with my own family, right? And so I would just encourage people to keep an open mind, right? Don't typecast yourself, hey, I'm a coder, hey, I'm only in real estate, like, or I'm only, whatever it may be, right? There's so many collaborative opportunities cross industries. I'm also seeing that too. Cross sectors are blending together. We're having, as an aside, we're having a conversation about conferences with Milken just finishing. And
how was that?
It's great. Dude, I
wanted to go so bad.
There's so many conferences, but I think the thing to note is like, they're all shifting. Like South by Southwest isn't what South by Southwest was like when it first started, right? It's not really a tech conference. It's like a conference for all types of influencers, if you will. And we were talking about Art Basel and how it really had its course, for art collectors, emerging artists, but now there's music and fashion and tech and investing all coming together, which is beautiful in its own thing, right?
So cool.
And so, again,
cool.
It goes in this open mind, like not necessarily one track. Keep an open mind for all the ways in which collaboration could happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what was the biggest takeaway that you got from the Milken?
To be honest, I actually went to meetings around. I had a lot of investors who were in town. So we took all the meetings around. I think the big topic is the uncertainty that we're hearing right now, or we're all feeling around the world. Obviously, the themes over the last several years continue to be there, whether it's climate, or related items. But again, it's this global uncertainty, and how can we work together to break through the uncertainty and get some stability for all, because there are all different types of businesses come together, not just investors, right? How can we live in this new world that we're creating?
Before we started talking on this podcast, like once we started recording, you and I were speaking about how there's a lot of younger people doing bigger things at an early age. And can you talk more about that? Like, I want to hear your thoughts about, like, in 10, 20, maybe even 30 years, like, what do you think the younger generation is going to be doing? That's something really, really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's exciting and it's daunting.
It is. It is.
It's daunting as a parent and also as someone who still works, right? But I think it's exciting in that we can see the younger generations do a lot of really more cool things. I just think about, like, revolution, I was listening to a podcast earlier about, like, again, the industrial revolution, how, like, these things have shifted the way we live, right? We're kind of going through that right now. I mean, we talked about AI earlier, right?
Yeah.
That's obviously going to shift sort of what our younger generation can do and are able to do more of, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of universal basic income.
Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, it was this, like, concept that came out, I think, during like 2 election cycles ago, where it was around, like, why don't we just issue a check to everybody, right? Like,
I've heard of that.
Right?
Yeah.
I know, it's like $1,500 a month, right? Like, this is I think it was like Elon backing, like, Yang, who had this whole thing around Yang around, like, technology is going to take over. Wonderful. They can do all that work while we can, like, have a renaissance again. We can paint, we can dance, we can play sports, whatever. And so that's extreme. But I see us moving towards that time period where more time will be available to us, right? How can our children use that time to be more creative and more impactful and enjoy their time on Earth, right? I mean, just look at driverless cars today, where I'm seeing so many more Waymos.
The Waymos.
Right?
Yeah,
right? But
crazy.
It frees up time, though. It frees up time for you to do other things, right? I think a lot of people are very scared of AI, of robots taking over, but it's actually opening up opportunity.
Yeah. And this is like an open-ended question. Where do you see, like, AI, just like in general, in, like, let's say 10, 15, 20 years? A lot of people are going to say it's going to take over the world. Like, it's going to be a new revolution. I just want to hear your take on it.
I wish we moved that quickly. I don't think the world moves that quickly. I was actually on a panel a couple years ago on this particular topic, and we referenced, the panelists were all talking about, is it Real Player One? Do you know that movie?
I do.
Right?
Yeah,
where they're wearing the headsets and
in
a different world. They have the haptic suits and all that. Like, I also was at CES this year, and I wore the haptic suit and tried it. I mean, that's still like, I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're all going to go home and put on a haptic suit and the goggles and port over a different world and whatnot. I think AI is just going to make our lives much more convenient, much more cheaper, and give us a lot more time back. I think that's what's going to happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years. 100 years? I don't know. But I think 30 years in my children's lifetime, I don't think we're going to see robots, like, walking the streets alongside us.
I agree.
Not the world.
I completely agree. I think AI is just going to make the world, like, a much more efficient place, and it's going to give us more time to spend with our loved ones and to do what we want. Because ultimately, like, that's what life is all about. We really just want to have the freedom and just to enjoy time with our loved ones. So I'm glad that I live in this age and that I get to experience these new technologies. So it's amazing.
It's good we have you as the next generation with a good head on your shoulders.
Yeah, that's going to be really, really fun. And I'm excited too. But I do want to ask you this. So I mentioned to you at the start that, I'm really big on legacy and, like, leaving an impact on the world and what you're going to be remembered for. So when people look at you and, like, your career in its entirety, like, what changes you left, like, everything, just, like, who is Matilda Sung? Like, what do you think and what do you want them to remember you for?
Ooh, that's a good question. Wow. I'm going to have to ponder this one for a second.
No, you're good.
So we're talking about all these, like, new technologies and everything, right? It's like, I have a much smaller perspective on that. I think, I would like to be remembered by my family as someone who was a mentor, a teacher, a caregiver. I found that one of the most gratifying things in my, like, last, like, 30, 40 years of adult life is really when you can open the eyes up of someone, not necessarily younger than you, but someone around you to see things differently, to chase an opportunity or dream that they have, that is really meaningful in whatever manner that you can do that in. I think even if it's just with my own kids, a few people that I worked with, I think that would be probably a legacy that I'd be proud of.
That's amazing. That's so, so cool. And if you could just give one more piece of advice to our younger audience who's like early 20s, they really want to make a change in their life and they know they have what it takes to do it, but they're just not getting at it and they really want to make a change in this world, what would it be?
Take that risk. There's no better time in society where you get celebrated for making mistakes if it becomes a mistake. Let's put it that way. Because I think that's the fear, right? Why are people not starting a company, moving jobs, I don't know, leaving town? Because they're scared of what the consequences might be. I have to say, like, we are now living in an era where there's so much buffer, right? We see people becoming lawyers and doctors at age 40, 50. Yeah. I mean, the world's on your side. So I know when you're young, it feels like a lot sometimes, right? It's like that holding onto that rigid idea. Take that risk. Especially when you're young like you, take that risk.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matilda. So yeah, this was the podcast. We're going to wrap it up now, but I do really appreciate you for coming on. This was great. You gave a lot of insightful information and I'm super excited to, obviously have you in my circle and I'm just excited to see what's going to happen in LA with the Paralympic Games and everything. But yeah, I'm just excited and thank you once again. It's been a pleasure and I'm really appreciative of your time.
Thanks so much, Zeus. It's been
Awesome.
Great to be here today.
Thank you.